A warm welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin with the latest from the war, where Russian strikes have hit infrastructure in Kyiv. Neighboring country Moldova also reported massive blackout, although it has not been directly hit. Multiple explosions have been heard after air raid sirens sounded across the country. There are no immediate reports on what targets may have been hit, but Kyiv's mayor has said that the strikes hit infrastructure facilities. Russia repeatedly has targeted Ukraine's power facilities, causing widespread blackouts. Meanwhile, Ukrainian military official says a newborn baby has been killed in Russian strikes on a maternity ward in Ukraine's southern Zaporizhzhia region overnight. Alexander Staruk, head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration, says Russian forces had launched huge rockets at a small maternity ward at the Vinyansk hospital in the city. And volunteer evacuations have begun in Ukraine's Kherson, but not for everyone. Ukraine's government had said it will pay for all costs related to voluntary evacuations from areas of the southern Kherson and Mykolaiv regions that have been liberated from Russian forces. There are several issues in the liberated areas as winter approaches. A large amount of territory in southern Ukraine suffered extensive damage to infrastructure after Ukrainian forces took it back, making it hard for the local residents to survive without electricity, heat and water supply. For one of the volunteers, it is about preparing for winter. The temperatures are dropping as we speak. We understand we won't be able to repair the damage done to the infrastructure in time. VOA's Anna Chenikova joins me now for more from Kyiv. Hi, Anna. Sadly, it's more shellings on Kyiv today. How damaging was this?
Good evening. Well, this particular one caused a lot of electricity shortages and outages across Ukraine and in Kyiv as well. So electricity in my place is just back just before we started our call, and it was out for around 3 to 4 hours. I should say that explosions in Kyiv were heard very loudly around the city. We know that 31 missiles were targeting Kyiv today, and 21 out of those were destroyed in the air. For the moment, we know about victims and wounded in Kyiv, but in Kyiv, we have confirmation that the main target was critical infrastructure, while in the Kyiv region, it was not only critical infrastructure, but also, unfortunately, one missile hit the residential building, and we also have confirmation of wounded and killed in that attack. Also, one rocket hit a private sector in the outskirts of Kyiv. Also, there are wounded. Again, final numbers are to be confirmed. For the moment, we know about at least 3 people dead in Kyiv and region after this attack. In general, I should say that straight after the attack, it was not only a problem with electricity supply, but also with water supply. And Mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, said to the civilians to make sure that they have enough drinking water, just in case water supply would not be restored. I should say that my experience, we didn't have water shortage at our place. However, there are reports of the water shortage around the city. Again, for the moment, electricity is back in Kyiv, but situation in Lviv, in Kharkiv, and in the city of Dnipro is much worse. For the moment, we know that there is almost a complete blackout, very big shortage in that areas. Also, not only in the cities itself, but also in the regions. Also, we hear about attacks on Zaporizhzhia and regions on Kherson. So basically, this attack was across the country, and every area of the country was affected. Also, the north part of the country is without electricity for the moment. So again, we're waiting for more confirmations, but well, situation is very tough and very difficult, and this damages, well, again, it's 8 days since the last attack, so this damages, again, they're just, you know, kind of getting on top of the previous ones.
And I cannot imagine what you and others could be going through at this time. But would you say that, you know, the strikes are now more intense, that this onslaught? And, you know, we're also hearing that the power cuts affected Moldova. How is that?
Yes, exactly. Today's attack also affected the neighboring Moldova. And this is important to understand, that Ukrainian energy system in general and the energy system of the neighboring countries is connected. And it's just a question of time when these countries would also feel the effect. After the last attack 8 days ago, there were some shortages in Poland reported. Today, quite a big problem with electricity in Moldova. And this is due to the fact that energy system in the areas close to the border were also affected. And of course, if these areas have big problem, almost a complete blackout, as we experienced today, of course, neighboring countries also affected. For the moment, as far as what we hear from Moldova officials, they're also working on restoring of the electricity. Maybe the situation is already better. For the moment, I don't have more information on Moldova.
And finally, Anna, what are the current temperatures in Kyiv at the moment, and how far could it dip in the coming months? Because, you know, I'm trying to ask, what role would that play in the government's plans for the people? As we're hearing, lots of people are also evacuating the city.
For the moment, the maximum minus temperatures that Kyiv particularly experienced was -3 degrees Celsius. Some areas in the mountains had more, but for the moment it's not. So it is almost winter, but it's not really too cold. So I cannot say that this is a temperature that will, you know, will be such a huge problem if these interruptions are happening, because of course, if it's complete blackout, even -3 degrees Celsius would be a problem. However, temperature would definitely get lower, and not only lower, you know, in terms of the number, but also considering that days are getting less warm and nights are getting more cold. And of course, it affects in general the temperature. So for the moment, there are different analyses and different predictions by people by people who report on weather forecasts. But it looks like winter should be not too cold. However, I guess that -10, -15 degrees could be expected. The government has already announced around 2,000 heating points across the country. This is kind of points for unbreakable people. This is how they called. So these are places where kind of a tent where people can come to get some heating, so heating point, electricity to charge their phones, to warm up. And to get some, you know, this kind of support and this kind of place to go in case there is a complete blackout or a complete heating outage. Because, of course, a lot of buildings, especially new buildings of the past, let's say, 10 years that have been constructed in Kyiv, heating system is connected to electricity system, and when there's no electricity, there's no heating. So, yeah, so government is making sure that this heating points and charging points basically are present in every region, in every settlement and every town and city. And of course, repair works are done 24/7 non-stop. As we can see today, for instance, in Kyiv, it took energy workers a couple of hours to get electricity back to people. But of course, it is given, you know, for a couple of hours, and then it will be outage again.
I know it is rationed, and so you also have to go. We'd like to thank you, for taking that time, your time of the rationing to join us. We'll speak to you again. Do continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Speaking amid the boom of artillery on Ukraine's front lines, the masked soldier said his ultimate goal was to liberate a land farther east and the Russian Republic of Chechnya. Maga, his nom de guerre, is part of a unit of Chechen fighters helping Ukraine battle Russian troops in the besieged city of Bakhmut. Many of his kinsmen also famously support the other side. Powerful Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov calls himself Russian President Vladimir Putin's foot soldier and sent members of his personal army to Ukraine to fight for the Russians. Kadyrov has also been a vocal critic of Russia's performance in the conflict so far and said Moscow should consider using a low-yield nuclear weapon in Ukraine, setting alarm bells ringing in the West. For Chechens under Ukrainian military command, the hope is that a victory in the war could spark political crisis in Russia, and with it, the downfall of Kadyrov, who some governments, including the United States, have accused of human rights abuses. Kadyrov has denied the charges. Pope Francis has said that Ukrainians today were suffering from the martyrdom of aggression and compared the war to the terrible genocide of the 1930s when Soviet leader Joseph Stalin inflicted famine on the people there. The pontiff, speaking to thousands of people in St. Peter's Square for his weekly general audience, mentioned the Holodomor, in which millions of Ukrainians died. He said this Saturday, November 26, marks the anniversary of the terrible genocide of the Holodomor, the extermination by famine, 1932 to 33, that was artificially caused by Stalin. According to the pontiff, he says, let us pray for the victims of this genocide and let us pray for so many Ukrainians, children, women, elderly, who are today suffering the martyrdom of aggression. Elsewhere, the Kremlin says that no substantive progress had been made towards creating a security zone around the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants in southeastern Ukraine. The power plant, which Russia seized shortly after its invasion, was rocked by shelling on Sunday, drawing condemnation from the UN nuclear watchdog, which said such attacks risked a major disaster.
Substantial progress in this regard. And besides, we should define what we mean by the security zone. You know that at the beginning of the conflict, Ukraine was calling on Russia to withdraw heavy weaponry that wasn't there. Then, apparently, everybody understood that there were no heavy Russian weapons there. So, speaking about the security zone, we should only be talking about those who are shelling the station. Who is this threat there? It's those people who are shelling the station who are creating the threat. The Ukrainian Armed Force Artillery. That's what we need to demand from Ukraine. To withdraw their heavy weaponry and stop shelling. To stop endangering the European continent.
Well, to talk more about the risks associated with shelling near the site, Dr. Uche Mado is the head National Data Center on Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty with the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. He joins me now. Welcome to the program. The UN described it as a close call. What are the risks to shelling on or around the nuclear power plant Zaporizhzhia?
Thank you for having me. You see, I'm a scientist and I'll talk from the scientist's point of view. Cesium-137 with a half-life of about 30 years is one of the radioisotopes that will be released should that plant be attacked or should anything happen to that plant. And cesium with half-life of 30 years will affect not only water but the foodstuff. You can imagine what will happen. The Japan incident that occurred the last time, close to 600 kilometers from the epicenter, it was felt by the agricultural produce. So it's really a close call for what happened. And we have to be careful, because not only will it affect agricultural products, it will also affect the population of where the plant is situated. As of 2021, the census of the town is about 710,000. And the cost of decontaminating the area that will be affected will be much. Remember that that plant is one of the 10 biggest plants that's in the world. And so far, if you take the incident that happened in Japan, it is costed Japan government close to 21 billion pounds for decontamination. So it's something that calls for concern.
So, Dr. Madhu, clearly the conflict persists. There is a risk of a nuclear accident at the facilities. So how can both Russia and Ukraine be protected? The obvious answer to that would be the fight should stop. But since that's not happening, what then, especially if both parties are blaming each other?
Well, let me tell you, like you said, it's for the two parties to apply caution, bearing in mind that the safety of the environment. You know, if anything should happen to that plant, the water that is drawing its cooling system, emergency cooling system from, spreads as far as the Black Sea, and from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. You can imagine the volume of contamination, that minus the air pollution, that will happen to the ecosystem. So they should both apply caution.
We also know that the Atom Expo is ongoing in Sochi. I think that's about wrapped up this week. The main event was a global nuclear industry and a platform for discussing the current state of the nuclear industry. Do you see Europe surmounting the energy crisis it is going through now, it is facing?
Sure, they can surmount it. You know, currently, according to the IAEA, there's about 439 nuclear power plants all over the world. If Europe should embrace nuclear energy, it's one of the alternatives that they can use to surmount their energy crisis. And with the evolving trend in the nuclear industry, with the coming in of the modular reactors, it is very, very much possible for them. When you look at the carbon footprint of a nuclear, when you compare it to something like the renewable energy, it's very, very good. Let me give you a little bit of statistics. When you look at coal, we are talking about death rates associated with accidents and air pollution per terawatt hour of electricity generated. If you take, for instance, coal has about 24.6%, nuclear has about 0.03%, and the renewables, solar 0.04%, solar 0.03%, and hydro 1.3%. You see that nuclear compares very well with them. And it's an alternative that Europe could explore to overcome the energy crisis they are facing.
We'd like to thank you, Dr. Uche Madhu, Head Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty with the NAEA and AEC. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
And the global economy should avoid a recession next year, but the worst energy crisis since the 1970s will trigger a sharp slowdown, with Europe hit hardest. This is according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. It's urging central banks to keep hiking interest rates. It also said that the world economic growth is set to slow from 3.1% this year to 2.2% next year, before accelerating to 2.7% in 2024, marginally rising to its 2022 forecast. The organization says the global slowdown was hitting economies unevenly, with Europe bearing the brunt as Russia's war in Ukraine both hits business activity and drives an energy price spike.
It is sadly a statement of the obvious that the global economy continues to face significant challenges. Russia's unprovoked, unjustifiable and illegal war of aggression continues to rage. Global growth is slowing down, continues to slow down, and confidence has weakened. Inflation has become broad-based and persistent, and in response, central banks have been raising policy rates and global financial conditions have tightened significantly. Consequently, the economic outlook that Alvaro and I are presenting today is fairly downbeat. We project global GDP to slow from 3.1% in 2022 to 2.2% in 2023. That is GDP growth well below the rate foreseen prior to the start of the war.